It's that time of year again. And if you're a Dolphins fan, buckle up because this breakdown is going to fire you up. The Miami Dolphins are heading into training camp with something to prove. And somehow, ESPN ranked them 24th in their NFL starting lineup rankings. That's behind the Raiders and even the Patriots. Disrespectful? That's an understatement. Now, before we break this down, from the roster strengths to key X factors and hidden weapons, let me say this. If Miami can start strong and stay healthy, don't be surprised if they make another playoff push. The early part of the schedule is very manageable. The potential? It's there. But come on, 24th? That's not just low, it's insulting. Before we dive into the latest Dolphins updates, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a single Miami Dolphins alert. Let's ride the 2025 wave together. Now let's get into the good stuff. According to ESPN, the biggest strength of the Dolphins roster is the wide receiver group. And honestly, that's the one thing they got right. Mike Clay highlighted that while Miami's receivers may have underperformed in 2024, the Tyreek Hill-Jaylen Waddle combo is still elite. Hill dropped from a massive 1,799 yards and 13 TDs in 2023 to 959 yards and 6 scores in 2024, mostly due to injuries and tough too-high safety coverage. But make no mistake, these two are still a top 5 WR duo in the NFL. Add in Nick Achane, who signed a 2-year deal and could quietly become a key piece. And this group is ready to explode. Let me tell you this. WR and RB are the heartbeat of Miami's offense right now. With this kind of firepower, Miami has no business being ranked behind half the league. And finally, the Dolphins may have found something they've been lacking for years. A big-bodied wide receiver who can dominate in the red zone and help in the run game. Nick Achane isn't flashy, but his size and blocking ability bring a balance Miami has desperately needed on the perimeter. There's also real intrigue around Malik Washington, the second-year wideout out of Virginia. He brings energy, speed, and that gadget-type versatility from the slot, something that could add a unique layer to Mike McDaniel's offense. Now, while the wide receiver and running back groups give this team firepower, the secondary is where the storm clouds gather. ESPN labeled Miami's secondary as the team's biggest weakness, and frankly, they're right. The losses were heavy. Jalen Ramsey gone. Javon Holland gone. Kendall Fuller gone. And the replacements? Let's just say it hasn't been aggressive enough. Miami added veterans like Artie Burns, Ashton Davis, and Ifeatu Melifonwu, but these are more depth moves than needle movers. In the draft, they waited until the 5th round to select Jason Marshall Jr. and Dante Trader Jr., two promising players. Sure, but throwing rookies into the fire won't fix everything overnight. Slot corner Kader Kohou remains a bright spot. He's a top 10 nickel in the league, and that's not an exaggeration. But the projected outside starters? Storm Duck and Cam Smith. That's where things get shaky over the grind of a 17-game season. Now, bringing in Minkah Fitzpatrick is obviously a headline move, a reunion that offers leadership and playmaking. But even with that, there's just no way around it. This secondary is Miami's weakest link. If the 2025 season ends in disappointment, don't be surprised if it's traced back to two things. 1. Injuries. 2. A secondary that couldn't hold up under pressure. We've been saying it since the draft. Not addressing the back end of the defense early might come back to haunt them. So here's the question for you. If ESPN says this is the 24th best roster in the NFL, where do you rank the Dolphins? Let us know. Now let's talk about what ESPN called the X factor for the Miami Dolphins, the running game. And honestly, they're spot on. While wide receivers and running backs are arguably the strongest groups on this team, the run game itself, how well it actually performs, could determine how far the Dolphins go in 2025. Let's rewind. In 2023, Miami had the most efficient rushing attack in the league by EPA per play. Explosive, creative, and unpredictable. But last season, that same unit plummeted to second worst in the entire NFL. What happened? Well, for starters, the run blocking completely collapsed. Miami dropped from 6th to 26th in run block win rate. That's a massive decline up front, and it showed in the numbers. Even the backs struggled. Achane, Jaylen Wright, and Raheem Mostert all posted negative rushing yards over expectation, according to Next Gen Stats. That's not a talent issue. That's a blocking and execution problem. Now, there's a reason for optimism. Yes, Miami lost Robert Hunt, one of the top 5 guards in the NFL, to the Panthers. That hurt. But the Dolphins responded by overhauling the interior of the offensive line. James Daniels and Jonah Savainia are now projected starters, a major upgrade over Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg from last year. At tackle, there's a challenge. Terron Armstead is gone, and Miami will lean on Patrick Paul, the 2024 second-round pick, in a full-time role for the first time. But even with that risk, this O-line is shaping up to be far stronger if it stays healthy. And that's what makes the run game the true wild card. This group doesn't need to be elite, it just needs to be reliable. If they can open up holes, even just a little more consistently, the Dolphins' entire offense becomes more dangerous. Bottom line, this run game can't be worse than last year. And in fact, it might be the most improved unit on the entire roster. Let's be clear. If you break down every position group on this Dolphins team, there's no doubt the run game and offensive line are poised for a serious bounce back in 2025. The unit up front just looks different this year. Stronger, deeper, and more physical. If they can just stay healthy, fans are finally going to see this offensive line work together the way it was built to. The pieces are there. Now it's about execution. Now, shifting to something that hasn't gotten enough attention, non-starters to keep an eye on. ESPN highlighted 2 names in particular. Backup linebackers KJ, Britt and Willie Gay Jr., both signed in free agency and both quietly adding serious depth to the middle of Miami's defense. And to be honest, it's a smart take. Let's break this down. Willie Gay Jr. brings sideline-to-sideline speed and coverage ability, a modern linebacker who can handle tight ends and backs in space. KJ, Britt is a more traditional thumper, a physical presence against the run who racked up 72 combined tackles last year with Tampa Bay. These 2 won't start unless injuries hit, but they offer something critical. Versatile, reliable depth. Miami already has Jordan Brooks and Tyrell Dodson holding down the starting roles, and that's one of the most underrated linebacker duos in the league. But in case something happens, you've got a tailor-made backup for each one. Britt can step in for Brooks, and Gay can sub in for Dodson. Different strengths, but complementary to the starters. Even beyond linebacker, this speaks to a broader theme. Miami's front 7 is deep, not just good on paper, but layered with veterans and specialists ready to step in if needed. If the Dolphins are going to overachieve in 2025, it won't be just because the stars showed up. It'll be because the depth delivered when it mattered. And that, right there, might be the quiet strength no one's talking about. There's no denying it. If the Dolphins want to break through in 2025, it starts with 2 keys. 1, a healthy offense, and 2, a dominant, physical front 7. That second one might be the biggest difference maker. Miami's defense has the potential to be nasty this year. Let's talk names. Jaylen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are both returning and healthy. When those 2 are right, they're one of the most dangerous edge rushing duos in the league. Chop Robinson, last year's breakout rookie, only looks more explosive heading into year 2. Kenneth Grant, the rookie defensive tackle out of Michigan, brings serious size and push in the middle. And behind them, a linebacker group that's not just solid, it's deep and versatile. This front 7 is built to stop the run, collapse the pocket, and set the tone physically, something Miami hasn't consistently done in recent years. Now, let's shift to ESPN's projected starting lineup. While the list had a few quirks like somehow including 12 starters on both offense and defense, math isn't their strong suit. The core is mostly on point. Quarterback. No surprise here. Tua Tagovailoa leads the way once again. The entire offense rides on his timing, rhythm, and decision-making. Running backs. ESPN listed both Achane and Jaylen Wright, which actually makes sense given Miami runs more two-back sets than almost any team outside of the 49ers. Still, in most cases, you'll see just one back on the field. Expect Achane to get the lion's share of early touches, with Wright rotating in as the change of pace option. Tight end. This is where things get interesting. ESPN listed Darren Waller as the starter. Now, that's a bold call. Waller hasn't played a snap since 2023 and took a full year away from the game. Until he's back on the field and proving he can move the way he used to, it's hard to pencil him in as TE1. If he can return to form, though, it changes the ceiling of this offense. Wide receivers. No surprises here. Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine make up the top three. That trio blends speed, route running, and physicality. A balanced and dangerous group. Offensive line. ESPN's projection matched up perfectly with the expected starting five. One note, they slotted Jonah Savania at right guard, which feels like the right move. But during OTAs and minicamp, Savania also took snaps at left guard next to Patrick Paul. Meanwhile, James Daniels, who's returning from an Achilles injury, didn't participate in those early reps, but he's expected to be ready by week 1. So the biggest question left might be this: who starts at left guard and who starts at right? Both Savania and Daniels are capable of handling either spot, but where they ultimately land could impact protection schemes and how the run game flows. So now that we've broken down the offense, let's wrap up with one final question. After finishing as a top 10 offense in both 2022 and 2023 under Mike McDaniel, the Dolphins took a big step back in 2024. Will they bounce back into the top 10 in 2025? That answer depends on two things: health and how quickly the offensive line gels. But let's flip to the other side of the ball, because defensively, things are shaping up in a really intriguing way. Let's start with the front six. Assuming Miami stays in nickel as their base package, which they did more often than not last season. Up front, expect to see Zach Sealer and rookie Kenneth Grant as the interior linemen. That duo combines raw power and athleticism, a perfect mix for collapsing the pocket and clogging run lanes. On the edge, if everyone's healthy, the rotation likely goes Chop Robinson, Jaylen Phillips, and then Bradley Chubb just behind them. Not because Chubb isn't elite, but because Miami may look to ease him in early after his injury. Either way, that trio gives you firepower from every angle. Linebackers? It's a clear pairing: Tyrell Dodson and Jordan Brooks. Defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver typically rolls with two linebackers in nearly every package, and this duo offers balance. Brooks in the run game, Dodson in coverage. Now comes the real wild card: the secondary. At safety, ESPN currently projects Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ashton Davis as the starters, giving Davis the early edge over Ifeatu Melifonwu. But that's one of the most open competitions heading into camp. Davis brings speed and special teams experience, but Melifonwu has the size and range to carve out a serious role. At cornerback, it's Kader Kohou locking down the slot. No surprises there. On the outside, Storm Duck and Cam Smith get the nod. That's a young, aggressive corner group, and they'll be tested early. Honestly, if you ask me right now, no injuries, no surprises, who I expect to take the field for Miami's defense on the first snap of week 1? I'd agree with ESPN's lineup almost across the board. But that safety spot next to Minkah? That's the one job truly up for grabs. Davis may have the early edge, but training camp will decide everything. And don't rule out some 3 safety looks either. Miami has the personnel to get creative. Look, when it comes to ESPN's projected starting lineup for the Miami Dolphins, I've got to give credit where it's due. They nailed it. From the offense to the defense, the projected starters, the biggest strength, the weakness, the X factor, even the sleeper non-starters, it all made sense. But here's where it completely falls apart. Ranking the Dolphins as the 24th best roster in the NFL? That's not just wrong. It's flat out disrespectful. Let's break this down. A ranking that low would project Miami to end up with a top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. And unless something catastrophic happens, that's just not realistic. If Tua Tagovailoa plays at least 15 games this season, and I'll even give him 2 missed games, there's no way this team is finishing in the bottom 10. None. Tua's career record is 38-24 as a starter. He doesn't lose 10 games in a season. It's not who he is. And it's not what this team is built for. Miami's offense, when healthy, is one of the most efficient in the league. The defense, while young in the secondary, has made real strides up front and at linebacker. Now let's talk about who ESPN ranked above Miami. New England? That's laughable. Las Vegas? That's the most egregious. Their secondary is a mess. Their cornerback room is one of the weakest in the league. And their top wideout is Jakobi Meyers. No disrespect. Solid player. But if that's your WR1, you're not ahead of Miami. Period. Even Arizona got ranked higher. And sure, they've added some talent, but they haven't shown enough to be placed above a Dolphins team with proven pieces on both sides of the ball. Honestly, if Miami had landed around 19th or 20th, I'd understand. That's fair. That's somewhere in the middle with room to prove themselves. But 24th? That's a slap in the face to a team that's been in the playoff hunt for 2 straight years and has done nothing but reload the roster this offseason. Final word? The Dolphins aren't a perfect team, but they're a lot better than 24th. And if they stay healthy, especially on offense, they're absolutely a playoff contender in 2025.